Hi aspirants, in my lecture number 8, I will discuss the remaining topics in Environmental Impact Assessment Part 2. In this part, we will discuss EIA process, shortcomings of EIA in the Indian context, and how to make EIA more effective. First, we would discuss the stages of the EIA process in the Indian context. The first stage is screening. The EIA process begins from the very start of a project. Once the developer has identified a need and assessed all the possible alternatives of project design and sites to select a preferred alternative, two important questions must be asked. What will be the effects of the development on the environment? Are these effects significant? If the answer to the second question is yes, an EIA may be required. Answering the question is a process known as screening and can be essential first step into a formal EIA. And the EIA process is, it must be stressed, iterative. This is demonstrated at this early stage of screening when the requirement for a formal EIA and its associated cost implications can lead the developer to reassess the project design with a view to reducing the significant impacts to a level where an EIA is not legally required. We now move to the next step, which is known as scoping, where it is decided that a formal EIA is required. The next stage is to define the issues that need to be addressed, that is, those impacts that have a significant effect on the environment. This is known as scoping and is essential for focusing the available resources on the relevant issues. The third step in this EIA process is the baseline study. What do you mean by the baseline study? Following on from scoping, it is essential to collect all relevant information on the current status of the environment. This study is referred to as baseline study as it provides a baseline against which change due to a development can be measured. Now we move to the fourth step, which is impact prediction. Once the baseline study information is available, the important task of impact prediction can begin. Impact prediction involves forecasting the likely changes in the environment that will occur as a result of the development. Now let us move to the fifth stage, which is impact assessment. The next phase involves the assessment of the identified impacts, that is impact assessment. This requires interpretation of the importance or significance of the impacts to provide a conclusion which can ultimately be used by decision makers in determining the fate of the project application. Let us move to the sixth stage, mitigation. Frequently, the assessment of impacts will reveal damaging effects upon the environment. These may be alleviated by mitigation measures. Mitigation involves taking measures to reduce or remove environmental impacts, and it can be seen that the iterative nature of the EIA process is well demonstrated here. For example, successful design of mitigation measures could possibly result in the removal of all significant impacts. Hence, a new screening exercise would reveal that there might have been no need to carry out a formal EIA had the mitigation measures been included from the start. Now we move to the seventh step, which is Environmental Impact Statement Report. The outcome of an EIA is usually a formal document known as Environmental Impact Assessment, which sets out factual information relating to the development and all the information gathered related to screening, scoping, baseline study, impact prediction and assessment mitigation and monitoring measures. It is quite common that a requirement of an environmental impact assessment is that it also produces a non-technical summary. This is a summary of the information contained within the EIS presented in a concise non-technical format for those who do not wish to read the detailed documents. This is very important as environmental impact statements are public documents intended to inform the public of the nature and likely consequences of a development in time to comment or participate in the final project design. Then we move to the eighth stage, EIS review. Once the environmental impact assessment is complete, the environmental impact statement, that is EIS, is submitted to the competent authority. This is the body with the authority to permit or refuse development applications. The competent authorities are often in a position of having very little time to make a decision and have a detailed and lengthy EIS to read through, which may contain errors, omissions and developer bias. It is essential therefore that they review the document. Review can take a number of forms. It may be purely an ad hoc process whereby the document is read and commented on by the decision maker. It can be more formalized, an expert opinion is sought, or it can be through the use of formal review methods designed specifically for the purpose. Basically, the review process should enable the decision maker to decide whether the EIS is adequate, whether it is legally compliant, whether the information is correct, and whether it is unbiased. If it is, they are then in a position to use the EIS as information to be considered in determining whether the project should receive consent. The competent authority is now in possession of the information they require about the possible effects of the development on the environment. They will use this information in combination with all of the other details and representations they have received to help them come to a decision. Then we move to another topic, which is another step, which is public hearing. Law requires that the public must be informed and consulted in a proposed development after the completion of the Environmental Impact Assessment Report. Anyone likely to be impacted by the proposed project is entitled to have access to the executive summary of the EIA. The affected persons may include bona fide local residents, local associations, environmental groups active in the area, any other person located at the project sites or sites of displacement. They are given an opportunity to make oral or written suggestions in the State Pollution Control Board, which is followed by the final step, which is follow-up. Follow-up relates to the post-approval phase of EIA and encompasses monitoring of impacts, the continued environmental management of a project, and impact auditing. Without any form of follow-up, EIA would operate as a linear rather than an iterative process, and an important step towards achieving environmental protection will also have been omitted. Follow-up presents an opportunity both to control environmental effects and to learn from the process and cause-effect relationships. Ideally, data generated by monitoring and other aspects of follow-up should be compared with the original predictions and mitigation measures in the EIS to determine, first, the accuracy of the original predictions, second, the degree of the deviation from the predictions, the third is the possible reasons for any deviation, fourth, whether mitigation measures have achieved their objective of reducing or eliminating impacts. Information generated by this process can contribute to the improvement of future EIA practice, for example, by enabling more accurate predictions to be made. Now we move to another topic, which is environmental impact assessment in the Indian system, its shortcomings and drawbacks. First first step is applicability. There are several projects with significant environmental impacts that are exempted from the notification, or their investments are less than what is provided for in the notification. The second step is composition of expert committee and standards. It is being found that the team formed for conducting EIA studies is lacking the expertise in various fields such as environmentalists, wildlife experts, anthropologists, and social scientists to study the social impact of the project. Another point is there is also a lack of exhaustive ecological and socio-economic parameters for impact assessment. Then we move to the third step, public hearing. Public comments are not taken into account at the early stage, which often leads to conflict at a later stage of the project clearance. A number of projects with significant environmental and social impacts have been excluded from the mandatory public hearing process. The documents which the public are entitled to are seldom available on time. The data collectors do not pay respect to the indigenous knowledge of local people. Then we move to another important step, which is quality. One of the biggest concerns with the environmental clearance process is related to the quality of EIA report that are being carried out. The reports are generally incomplete and provided with erroneous data. EIA reports ignore several aspects with carrying out assessments, and significant information is found to be omitted. EIA document is itself so bulky and technical, which makes it difficult to decipher and aid in the decision-making process. There is no accreditation of EIA consultants. Any such consultant with a track record of fraudulent cases cannot be held liable for discrepancies. The fifth step is monitoring, compliance, and institutional arrangements. For strategic industries such as nuclear energy, the environment management plan are kept confidential for political and administrative reasons. Details regarding effectiveness and implementation of mitigation measures are often not provided, and information not to be disseminated to the communities. Third, emergency preparedness plans are not discussed in sufficient details, and information not disseminated to the communities. Now we move to another topic, which is how to make EIA more effective in the Indian context. What would be the recommendations to make it more effective? First is independent EIA authority. Second is sector-wise EIAs needed. Third is creation of centralized data bank Fourth is dissemination of all information related to projects from notification to clearance for local communities and general public. Fifth, all those projects where there is likely to be significant alteration of ecosystems need to go through the process of environmental clearance without exception. Sixth, no industrial development activity should be permitted in ecologically sensitive areas. Seventh, public hearings should be applicable to hitherto exempt categories of projects which have environmental impacts. Seventh, public hearings should be applicable to hitherto exempt categories of projects which have environmental impacts. Eighth, the focus of EIA needs to shift from utilization and exploitation of natural resources to conservation of natural resources. Ninth, currently EIA reports are weak when it comes to assessment of biological diversity of a project area and consequent impacts on it. The checklist of EIA needs to include impacts on agricultural biodiversity-related traditional knowledge and livelihood. 10th, a national level accreditation for environmental consultants should be adopted. 11th, the notification needs to make it amply clear that the provisions of site clearance does not imply any commitment on the part of impact assessment agency to grant full environmental clearance. The consent of local communities or resident association needs to be made mandatory before the grant of environmental clearance. 12. The current executive committee should be replaced by representatives from various stakeholder groups who are reputed in environmental and other related fields. 13. The EIA notification needs to build within it an automatic withdrawal of clearance if the conditions of clearance are being violated. Provisions of stringent punishment should be incorporated for non-compliance. A robust monitoring mechanism should be established for environmental clearance by the State Department. 14. Citizens should be able to access the authority for redressal of all violations of the EIA notification as well as issues relating to non-compliance. The last and the final point, 15. NGOs, civil society groups, and local communities should build capabilities to proactively and effectively use the EIA notification in a productive manner. Now, what should be the roadmap? We need much stronger laws to protect the environment, to ensure that natural resources are available to the poorest who need them the most. There are a large number of communities like Adivashis, tribal communities, peasants, coastal and fishermen communities whose livelihoods mainly depend on the state of the environment. Any drastic changes in EIA will have a direct impact on the living and working conditions of these people and the ecology. Now there is a need for a forward-looking law. An ideal way forward would be to enact a standalone law on the EIA given its position of importance in India's regulatory framework on environment. It would also be important for the EIA regime to include assessments of project impacts on health, climate change and biodiversity, thus making the exercise more holistic. A mere box ticking approach by concerned authorities should end. In conclusion, it can be said that a well-functioning and effective EIA regime is a prerequisite to India's quest for sustainable development. Before I sign off, do tune in for my next videos. Please share this video with your friends and subscribers in large numbers. We request you all to enroll for UPSC main exam GS paper 2021 and prelims cum mains exam 2022. You can contact mobile number 8368501642 for further details. We really appreciate your encouragement and constructive suggestions. Stay awesome until then. Thanks. 20 minutes.